Today, Esther Patt is joining me for the community planning conversations. Esther has had a intriguing and broad-based career within our community. She's presently director of the Champaign-Urbana Tenant Union and also very involved in a program called CommunityShares, and has just recently stepped down from her tenure on the Urbana City Council. So we have many topics to cover this afternoon, one of them being CommunityShares. But before I get to that, I want to welcome Esther.
Thank you.
And ask her a bit about her educational background and how is it that you happened to come to Champaign-Urbana and get so deeply involved in our communities and making a place a better place to live.
I originally came here in 1973 to attend the U of I as an undergraduate, and while I was living here, I decided that this was the place I wanted to spend my life. I really fell in love with Urbana, especially in the summertime. That's what hooked me. So I was looking for ways to become involved in the community beyond the student population, and I found the Champaign-Urbana Tenant Union and signed up as a volunteer. I earned my bachelor's degree in English, and just actually largely because of my involvement in the tenant union, just started finding out about all sorts of organizations in this community, and one thing just led to another, and I ended up coming to city council meetings and volunteering in candidates' campaigns, and before you know it, I was just totally entrenched in the fabric of our community.
And never looked back.
Never looked back. I really do love this community. I think it's a great place to live.
And were you equally as active in high school back in Chicago?
No, actually, I peaked at my activism a little later than some people. It was really, well, my first few years in college here, I really didn't do much of anything except go to class and work and hang out with my friends. But once I got the bite, I just never gave it up.
Well, one of the aspects that I find as a great compliment to you and the hard work that you've done is more people have said to me, Esther Patt is always prepared for the city council meetings, and that just has raised the bar for everybody else on the city council. So with that, I share that compliment to you.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
It's fantastic. One of the reasons I invited you on to community planning conversations is to talk a bit about CommunityShares. We'll get to some of the other topics too.
Okay.
But this is a unique program, and why don't you start by describing it and how it came about?
Sure. CommunityShares is a charitable federation, and actually, locally, it had a predecessor, the Public Interest Fund of Illinois. A number of not-for-profit groups got together and created the Public Interest Fund back in 1991. And 3 years ago, we merged with the Illinois Women's Funding Federation, another charitable fund, to create CommunityShares of Illinois. CommunityShares is actually in existence in numerous states. I don't know the number off the top of my head.
Well,
you probably do because you looked at our website
well,
recently and
I did
checked.
my homework, and I did check, and I learned that it's across the country.
Yes, there's a national organization, and there are CommunityShares in many, many states. And its primary purpose is to raise funds for charitable organizations, for not-for-profits, that particularly not-for-profits that are working to make social change and to improve the quality of life for people who are often neglected by other more mainstream efforts. And the key fundraising strategy is to be available as a choice in workplace giving. I know a lot of people in this community know what that means because they work at the university. You know, other folks don't, but at many workplaces, particularly public workplaces like the University of Illinois, the cities, the school districts, the park district, the county, workers are asked every year to participate in a charitable fund drive. And what's really great from the worker point of view about this is instead of writing one big check to one organization or several organizations, people can authorize payroll deduction. Mm-hmm. So even someone who doesn't make a lot of money, who wants to support a charity, could authorize $2 a month to come out of their paycheck. Or those of us who have more money might authorize $20 or $30 out of our paycheck, but instead of having to give one big donation at once, we have money taken out of our paychecks every month, and that money goes to the charitable federation that is designated by the worker, and then the federations distribute the money to the different member groups, and that's how CommunityShares and several other fundraising federations work.
And by having it taken out of your paycheck, does that lower your taxable income?
It doesn't lower your taxable income, but the donation, I mean, in terms of your paycheck, but the donation is a charitable donation. So when you do if you donate to any organization that has tax exempt status, if you itemize your deductions when you pay your taxes every year, you can deduct that donation. So it would have the same tax effect whether you gave to ChampaignUrbana Tenant Union by writing me a check and handing it to me now, or by donating at work. The difference is you won't feel it as much if you donate at work because it's spread out in 12 payments.
I was just asking because sometimes things can be set up so that something taken out of your paycheck does reduce your taxable income. And I wondered if CommunityShares had been able to put themselves into that kind of configuration.
It's possible your question is going over my head as far as
That's
my
okay.
knowledge of the tax law, but I know that basically the way it works is you have your gross pay, and then they take out your federal and your state and your Social Security or your SEWRs and your health insurance and your union dues, and if you choose, they also can take out donations to charities, and CommunityShares and its members are among the choices of charities that people at public workplaces and some private workplaces can designate to receive that money.
And why here in Champaign-Urbana? Why not in Chicago? If you're the only one within the state, I noticed.
We're not the only charitable federation in the state, actually. We're
CommunityShares, right.
Actually, CommunityShares is a statewide organization, and it has about 17 of its 70 members are local organizations here in Champaign County or statewide organizations that have an active presence here. There are also members of CommunityShares of Illinois that are Chicago-based, Springfield. We have a few members in Galesburg, Rockford, Southern Illinois, and then there are a number of statewide organizations like the Illinois Coalition of Citizens with Disabilities and the Illinois Hunger Coalition that work throughout the state of Illinois, and those are all choices because among the members of CommunityShares.
But but your headquarters, your main office is located
because
here.
it was folks here who started it.
Who started it?
Well, actually, I guess the lion's share of the credit should go to Mike Doyle. He was definitely the leader, and he's the executive director of the organization. He was the leader in initiating this, and I think in Champaign County, it'd be a lot easier than in some places for something like this to take off because we have so many very active, dedicated, forward-thinking people involved in not-for-profits. We have a very strong social services community here and very strong community change community here. And so there were a lot of people who were interested in working with Mike to make this happen. And we did.
You did, indeed. And just to give a little additional background on Mike Doyle, Claudia Lenhoff was on the program a number of weeks ago, and she stepped into the role he once had in the Champaign County healthcare consumers. And in the spirit of full disclosure, Mike and I were in school together when the Champaign County healthcare consumers were started. So the history goes back, and he moved forward. And wasn't he very involved in the group around Carl Park and the incinerator?
Yeah, he lives almost next door to Carl Hospital, and he was one of the, I'm not positive, but I think he may have been one of the founders of, certainly he was a very active member for many years in UCAN, which is United Citizens and Neighbors, and they're the neighborhood group around the Crystal Lake Park area, or
right,
around
I said
Carl
Carl
Hospital.
Park.
Yeah, right. You meant Carl Hospital.
You knew exactly what I was.
People mix those up a lot. Yeah.
Referring to. Well, I was on your website, of CommunityShares of Illinois website. I did notice an application for membership Do you want to talk a bit about
Sure.
how one of these many organizations that you have alluded to can become a member?
Sure. Actually, I'm chair of the membership committee for CommunityShares, so
Okay.
that's something I'm up on. Or potential members can submit applications that they can find on our website between October 15th and December 1st. The membership committee reviews the applications. Usually, we have some conversation with the organizations, and then the full board, which is made up of people around the state, make decisions on which organizations to approve for membership. And I'll tell you, as far as being a member of CommunityShares, this is one of the ways in which we're a little different than some of the federations. A number of organizations, and I should mention also, I'm going to stop for a moment and mention, there are at least a dozen different charitable federations in the state of Illinois, like the Black United Fund, the American Cancer Society, the Special Olympics, the United Way, the Combined Health Appeal. These are all federations that are choices in workplace giving at the public workplaces that are open to every approved federation. And what we've found, which is really I think very positive statement about people and the way things work in charitable giving, is that the more choices people have, the more money people give. I know there was one time when there was a monopoly in workplace giving and people had only one choice. And when the law was changed, actually as a result of a lawsuit that was brought against the state of Illinois by one of our CommunityShares members, the American Civil Liberties Union, it was determined that United Way could not be the only agency that raises funds in workplaces, that others would have a chance too. And federations started forming for this purpose. And there were some people who were concerned that this would reduce giving because they just saw it as the pie has only so many slices, and if too many people are cutting into the pie, no one's going to have a big slice. But in fact, the pie just keeps growing and growing and growing because people want to give. A lot of people have a lot of money to give. A lot of people don't have very much money to give, but they want to give what they can. And workplace giving is just the very ideal way for people to make a charitable contribution in a way that they can afford, because they're deciding it's coming right out of their paycheck. And the more choices that people have, as I said, the more people who give and the more that individuals give, because there are so many charities and good efforts that they do support. What we do at CommunityShares, we find, like many of the other federations, that about a third of the money that's donated every year through workplaces around the state is donated to CommunityShares as a whole, and rather than designated to specific members.
So what you're saying is that if they saw this list of organizations, they could indicate specifically where the money should go.
Right.
Okay.
And so some people will say, I want my money to go to, I want this much to go to Champaign-Urbana Tenant Union, and this much to go to PACE, and this much to go to Champaign County Healthcare Consumers. And there are some people who will say, gosh, there are just so many, I'm just going to give my money to CommunityShares, let them decide how to divide it up. Now, some federations use that undesignated money for their operating expense. And it's actually a pretty big piece of the pie of what we get. In CommunityShares, we distribute it back among the member organizations, and we do it based on a sweat equity formula. So all the different member organizations have the opportunity throughout the year, every year, to do volunteer work for CommunityShares to help promote awareness of it. And we have a little system of getting points for the different things that we do. And then at a certain number of points equals a share, and each member can earn up to 4 shares. So once the year is up, we add up all the shares, and then we divide the undesignated money based on that sweat equity formula. It's very beneficial to a member group if you have folks who are going to volunteer and do the work, because depending on how much money there is and how much you get, you could even, I know from my perspective from Champaign-Urbana Tenant Union, our designated amount we're probably somewhere in about the middle of all the 70 groups, and we pretty much double our money every year. So in a way, if you contribute to Champaign-Urbana Tenant Union, we're going to get almost 200% of your donation because of our active participation in community shares. So I mention all this as a long answer to your question about people joining. If an organization's thinking of becoming involved in community shares and wants to apply, it's important to understand that there are, at every workplace that is open to choice in giving, there are a dozen federations, and many of the federations have 70 members just like we do. So you're not going to have any kind of a windfall from people opening the booklet in their workplace and, oh, noticing your organization. You really do need to do your own work to get your supporters to contribute to you through workplace giving. And where a big financial benefit for the organization comes in is if you do the work to promote community shares as a whole and earn those shares to get the additional money. So that's what folks should just think about if anyone's watching and thinking our organization should join. But if they go to the website, it explains a lot of these things about the points and the shares, and there is an application. And we're always interested in organizations that are working to make our community a better place, to improve people's lives, providing direct service, working for social change. That's what Community Shares is all about, and we welcome applications.
Well, it leads me to ask a couple of clarifying questions for our viewers. What are the criteria used by the decision makers within Community Shares as to whether an organization would be accepted to be part of the, and you're using the term federation, so you might
Well,
describe.
just because it's an umbrella. Community Shares is an umbrella organization, and then there are the members within it.
Okay.
There are certain minimum requirements. An organization does have to have a 501c3 tax exempt status.
All right.
That's the same status an organization would have to have for a contributor to be able to deduct on their taxes donation to it. And they should be an organization that is in some way working to provide service or change policies and systems with a goal toward improving the quality of people's lives. We are especially interested, and this might not be as important to people locally here, but we're especially interested in adding new members in regions in the state where we do not have as many members. Like we have a lot of members in Champaign County and in the Chicago area, in Bloomington Normal, in Southern Illinois, in the area around Peoria, Galesburg, really right up to Quad Cities.
Okay,
so
the northwest area
yes.
of the state.
So that's something we're looking for. We're also interested in adding new member organizations that address issues and needs that we currently do not have as many members working on. Certainly more groups working on the environment, lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender rights. Those are two areas where the board feels that we should be specifically working to attract more members. We have quite a few organizations that work on women's and children's needs in the Chicago area, local women's and children's organizations here in Champaign County, and would certainly be a nice addition. So pretty much if a not-for-profit organization is interested in bolstering its fundraising and putting some of the more human energy into the effort to raise funds, they should check us out and consider application.
Okay, remind everybody of the decision days. Was it the 15th of?
Well, actually, they could submit any time, but before December 1st.
Before December 1st. Yes. And we have not given the website address, and I'm quickly looking at it. It's
Okay.
okay.
Well,
you go ahead.
All right. Yeah, www.cs-il.org. And if you just go ahead and actually Google Community Shares of Illinois, you'll get it too. That's really the one. We all are always giving out our websites, but now with Google, as long as you have a whole name,
That's
you'll
right.
get the right one. And even when you don't, a lot of times you'll get choices. But there are a lot of community shares in the country, so if you just put in community shares, you're going to get community shares of Wisconsin and community shares of Colorado. So just say community shares of Illinois.
Yes, and if you do put community shares in, as I did when I started my research on this, you get the national page.
Uh-huh.
And then down the left side, as always, is the format. You'll find the Champaign. And actually, it came up CommunitySharesIllinois.org.
Oh, the whole, so, yeah, it's 3ws.communitysharesillinois.org.
So that's the way
We'll do
it came
that.
up,
All
and
right.
you'll get a lot of information about this. And you did send me the list of groups within our area, and I hope it will roll at the end of the
Oh, okay,
program.
good.
But until such time, maybe you would like to point out.
Tell you a few about
Oh,
a few
you
of
have
them.
it
Yeah, I
right
have
there.
my list too. Yes, of course I remember some, but I don't. There are 17, but well, I'll start by talking about mine.
All right,
So
that's
mine's
fair.
Interesting. Years ago, what is it now? 36 years ago, students at the University of Illinois created a tenant union program to help students at the university with landlord-tenant problems. And lo and behold, within the first couple of years, they found that there were numerous people in not only Champaign-Urbana, but throughout the county who were not University of Illinois students, but who were renters and who had landlord-tenant problems. Many of them were the same types of problems that students had, and often the consequences were more severe because the people were mostly very low income. And so way back then, it was actually the students who were, and some of the ones who were involved in creating tenant union at the university, created the Champaign-Urbana Tenant Union. And they incorporated it and opened an office and started raising funds for it. And now here we are all these years later, and there still are 2 tenant union programs.
I discovered
And
that.
yes, and I like to make the point because sometimes, well, especially with me, I'm actually employed at the university to run the campus one, which is well funded enough to have a number of staff people. Champaign-Urbana Tenant Union is a smaller entity, but it is open full-time, year-round, and there are 2 very capable housing counselors. I'm not one of them because I'm at the campus office, but they are stationed there at 44 East Main, and will answer the phone at 352-6220 to help anyone in Champaign County who has a problem or a question related to landlord-tenant relations.
And is not that also where the Office for Community
Yes,
Shares is?
Community Shares and Champaign County Healthcare Consumers and Champaign-Urbana Tenant Union are all in the same suite of offices over at 44 East Main. And actually elsewhere in the building are some other do-gooder organizations that help people as well. But we are, Champaign-Urbana Tenant Union sublets the space from Champaign County Healthcare Consumers and has for, I think probably 20 years.
And for those who maybe don't know our community, it's right across from Coons.
Yes, department store, which a lot of people.
As a marker.
And for the younger folks, it's across the street from Jupiter's, which seems to be,
Yes,
more
all
people
right.
seem to know that this huge department store. They say, no, and they say, Jupiter's, oh yeah.
Okay, we have it marked.
Yes.
We have it marked. Go ahead.
And actually, Community Shares is really a good vehicle for Champaign-Urbana Tenant Union to do fundraising because Champaign-Urbana Tenant Union is a small not-for-profit organization, and it would, on its own, could never have the reach that it gets to people in all these public workplaces here in the county just through Community Shares. And that's true of a number of the other organizations. We have a couple of...
But before you leave
sure.
that, let's
Oh, sure.
underline again for folks watching
Uh-huh.
that there is a tenant union
Mm-hmm.
entity that's available for people of the community because oftentimes
Yes.
everybody focuses on that entity for use by the students. So
Well, it's funny, in this community where so many people are homeowners by the time they're 25 years old, and I think more so than in communities like Chicago where there's a much larger middle-class tenant population, most places I go, even if people don't know me and don't know anything about services, if I say tenant union, in this town, oh, most people just assume we're talking about the students.
Right.
And students are close to half the adult population of Champaign-Urbana, so that's not a silly assumption. But if you associate with, say, social service providers, people
Right,
in any
exactly.
numerous agencies, people of public health, people of township, you say tenant, they know what that's about, and they know that's about poor people often living in substandard housing, people who have severe economic crisis when they get cheated out of a couple of $100 because it's a whole lot more money to them than
Per
many of
se.
us could even imagine. And that's why it's actually that's what I find so compelling about Champaign-Urbana Tenant Union and about the importance of keeping that program going for all the people in the community who are not students, because they need it, and so often people can get evicted because they just didn't understand what their rights were, what they could do and what they could not do. And to be able to prevent people from having a severe tragedy in their life just by giving them some information and maybe making a few phone calls for them is really very, very important and very empowering. So I'm so proud to support this organization, and I volunteer a lot of my time for it because I already have the knowledge because of the job I have at the university, and I especially like to help people who are very much in need.
Many people in the community don't realize the need of the lower income folks in housing, and that, what is it, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, the waiting list for Section 8, well, they had to close the list
Yes.
because it was something like 600 people on the list, and that's just not general domain information in the community. So it's good to have you sharing an opportunity and agency for people to go to when they run into these issues.
Yeah,
But-
since we're on the topic, I'll just throw in a little factoid. Approximately 80% of households with income below the poverty level get no financial assistance, Section 8 public housing or anything, with affording the cost of housing. I don't think people realize that. I think a lot of folks just assume that everyone who's poor is getting subsidized rent, and actually the overwhelming majority of people who are working full-time but can't afford rent get no government assistance whatsoever with paying their rent, and that makes them very vulnerable prey to slum landlords and to unfair and dangerous housing situations.
They fall through the cracks. Len Human was a guest, and you gave us an opportunity to talk about some of those issues. And I notice his organization is one of your...
The Homestead Corporation.
The Homestead
Yes.
Corporation, and he did talk about...
Yeah,
that.
Homestead's another organization that is not a really big, rich, not-for-profit. I mean, not that any of them are rich, but there are some organizations that, everyone recognizes the name.
Habitat for Humanity is
and
doing better.
Yeah, right. But there are the little ones are doing very important work, and community, being a member of CommunityShares really is provides a leg up for organizations that are working hard on fundraising, but are not really big and don't have that name recognition. It's the sort of the way the power of all of us coming together is so much more than just the sum total of each of us individually. And Homestead is one of the organizations in CommunityShares to which I designate a little bit of money every month, and I really like the work that they do too.
Well, as you review the list for everybody watching, it will become apparent to them that they're really niche organizations. They each have their small place within the community that they're making a difference. So talk about a few more of them.
Champaign County Healthcare Consumers, and they're perhaps a little more well known, but also they're a basically a volunteer I mean, they have staff, but they're largely a volunteer powered organization, and working with consumers on a variety of healthcare issues. They have a dental referral program because we have such a serious problem in this community with low-income people not being able to afford dental care and get it. And they have a consumer health hotline, which is where they find out about the problems in healthcare delivery that often result in the campaigns that they choose to work on, dealing with a variety of issues, whether it was over the years HMOs, Medicaid discrimination, and they also work with the individual clients who call the hotline to try to help resolve their individual problems. The medical billing that they project that they were working on, resulted in a national attention to the problems of hospitals pursuing impoverished people to pay bills that they can't afford, and I think has had a very positive effect on getting hospitals to provide more charity care.
And a very successful group.
Yes.
They pick their campaigns assiduously and
Yes.
do a good job on them.
Yes. A new member this year is the Champaign County Humane Society. One thing I should have mentioned for people who are looking at this from the donor perspective, if you work at the university or Parkland or any other public workplace, if out of all these 70 organizations you still don't see some charitable group to which you want to make a contribution, you can just designate a contribution to the group of your choice. And over the years, we've had
Even
several.
if they have not joined.
Even if they're not a member, and you can donate through CommunityShares to the charity of your choice, as long as it's a not-for-profit, tax-exempt organization.
Mm-hmm.
And the Champaign County Humane Society is one that we have over the years gotten, I don't know the number, but a number of people have made undesignated or have made designated donations under donor choice through CommunityShares because they want to give to the Humane Society, and the Humane Society was not part of any federation, and so now in this past year they have joined. A lot of people appreciate and support the work of the Humane Society, and now they have an opportunity to just check them off when they make their charitable donations at their workplaces. We mentioned Habitat for Humanity. Actually, statewide, a number of Habitat for Humanity chapters are members of CommunityShares, and the Illinois Habitat for Humanity, which is the umbrella group for the habitats in Illinois, is also a member of CommunityShares. And our local Habitat for Humanity has been very active in recent years, building lots of houses. You know all about that.
Well, Lori Huth joined us one day for a discussion about the success of their building blitz.
Yes, the blitz, that was really something. And I don't know if we have time to go through all of these. The Illinois Disciples Foundation, actually that's one of the groups that has Illinois in its name, but actually is a local Champaign County organization, and they're one of the I think one of the leading social change organizations in our community.
And where the food co-op is.
And where the food co-op is in the Disciples Foundation. That's right. Illinois CASA, the court-appointed special advocates, there are CASAs around the state, and there is one here in Champaign County. The Illinois CASA is also an umbrella group over all of the different ones, and it is a member of CommunityShares. The Illinois Migrant Council is based in the Chicago area, but they have field offices all over the state. They work with migrant workers on their various issues related to housing, health care, their rights as workers, and they are active in Champaign County, more so up in the Rantoul area than in ChampaignUrbana. The Illinois Stewardship Alliance is an organization that is also a statewide organization, although there are some local people here too, and they work on the issue of fighting hunger, very important in these days as we were talking about poverty. Certainly housing that's the main thing I see because of the work that I do, but hunger is also a very important issue, and they're an organization that works on that as well as on environmental concerns. The League of Women Voters of Illinois, there are league chapters all over the state, and the state organization of the League of Women Voters, promoting good citizenship and active participation of people in their government, and really the whole idea that government is for the people, and people's active involvement is what makes government better. I think that's what the League's all about. I'm a member of the League too, and they're a member. The NAACP is one of the, actually probably is the oldest continuous civil rights organization in this country, and the Illinois chapter of that. So again, the state organization of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People is a member. The National Interfaith Committee for Worker Justice. Oh, I guess I should mention, now we're getting into national. I mean, some of these are national groups. That's a group that has people active in a number of parts of the state, and there also is a local chapter here working for worker justice. Illinois Operation Snowball, that is, Operation Snowball is a youth organization, works on giving children organized ways to fulfill their or learn how to fulfill their potential as they grow up and become healthy, happy people in this world. I don't know if they would like my description. That's something that I've always thought about
contributing adults.
Yes, contributing adults. But no, they work with youth. They work with youth, and actually, I don't know even how many cities in the state. And again, the state, the umbrella organization, is the member of CommunityShares. PACE is another new member. That's a local center for independent living, and they work on promoting the rights of people with disabilities, and specifically with a focus on independent living for people with disabilities. That's something that's very important. I'm also involved with PACE, so I'm involved with a lot of these groups. Is that people with disabilities, whether the disabilities involve affect their ability to walk or hear or see or speak, should not be separating them from participation in the mainstream of society. And in fact, many people with just a little bit of assistance or certain even availability of certain devices can live independently in ways that they cannot in a society that puts up barriers against people with disabilities. And so PACE and the other centers for independent living around the state work on making those changes. And then it just happens alphabetically that we have 3 organizations that fall into in the category of alternative media. And that's the PrairieNet Community Networking Initiative. A lot of people are familiar with PrairieNet because they use it. And PrairieNet also does provide access to the internet for a lot of people, for small not-for-profits, and for low-income people who otherwise would not have that access.
Yes, it opened things up.
And the Urbana Champaign Independent Media Center and they have their own building now. Just the old,
might tell people where that is.
And I forget the street address, but it's the old post office in downtown Urbana, just north of Lincoln Square. As you walk out the north door of Lincoln Square Village, there it is. And finally, one of our early members, WEFT Radio, which is community-based radio, and I should know this. I don't know how long they've been around, but I think WEFT is it's more than 25 years old, I think. Does that sound right to you?
It is, because I've lived here 35 years.
Okay.
And so yes, it is. Yes, it started shortly after I moved here. And it was the only alternative in the community, so a very important aspect. I just wanted to make a connection here with PACE and the Center for Independent Living. Since we demographically in the United States are an aging population, much of the principles that PACE stands for and works toward certainly have application to the concept of aging in place, which is a concept that is getting much more visibility in how we plan housing and how we plan communities, so that people, should they choose to want to not be moved out of where they've been living most of their life into a nursing home, then will have some of those alternatives available to them. So it's not as isolated as people may view it.
Well, it's important for people to realize that any one of us who currently does not have a disability or perceives ourselves as not having disabilities could become a person with a disability, and many of us will before the end of our lives. And that's and because of the demographics, there is more attention being paid now to some of these issues. But we still have a long way to go in terms of accessibility. Even a movie theater that we like here in town doesn't have accessible bathrooms. You know, and a friend of mine who uses a wheelchair pointed that out to me, and I never even really thought about it, and I don't really, you know, it wasn't even on my radar. But she went to the movies there and couldn't even use the restroom, and that's something that's something that should change.
Yes, it does have to change, and if we had what we tend to call universal design, which means design, so everybody can get to any part of any venue, entity, house, building, your friend would not have been challenged
Right.
at that juncture. That leads me into a good question to bring in your role at the tenant union.
Yes.
And how often do you receive comments, complaints, seek requests for help from people who are challenged physically and are looking for housing?
Well, we actually, complaints about not getting the accommodation that they are entitled to by law has been the more common call or visit that we've gotten at the tenant union, and those have gone down in recent years.
Okay.
But for a very long time, one of the most common disability rights issues that would come up at the tenant union would be a tenant wants to move into an apartment that is a first floor apartment, and what that person needs is to ramp the entrance. They need a 0-step entrance, and that's all they're asking for, and they're willing to pay for it themselves, or they're getting the help of a wonderful organization like Ambux, and the landlord wouldn't allow it. And actually in Urbana and Champaign, for years and years and years, for decades, the law has required a landlord to allow a modification for the purpose of achieving access for a person with disability. But actually even federal law, signed by President Reagan in 1988, requires landlords to allow people with disabilities to make the necessary modifications. On the plus side, what I find is in most cases when people have contacted us about that problem, when the landlord has been presented with the law, they say okay, and it's not a big fight. I don't know when we've had someone have to actually file a complaint. Actually, I do remember one once. This wasn't about a ramp. There was a man who was interested in a second floor apartment in a building with an elevator, and the landlord refused to rent to him because he used a wheelchair. And he said to him, well, what if there's a fire? How will you get out? The man pointed out that all the housing for seniors and people with disabilities in this community are just about the only high-rise buildings in the community there was for seniors and people with disabilities.
That's
Now,
right.
there are people with disabilities who use wheelchairs who would not want to be above a first floor because they don't want to be in that position.
Right.
It's not the best in the world if that's not what you want. There are other people, like this man, who says, I would rather sleep with my windows open at night, which is what I could do in a second floor, and I'll deal with a fire. The firefighters know how to get people out. There's a place to go behind the fire door on a landing, and this landlord would not rent to him, and he did file a complaint with, that was in Champaign, through the City of Champaign Human Relations, and the landlord ended up having to pay him some money, quite a bit, I think, though I don't know the amount because that wasn't public.
So
as
it was
settlement of the
settled that
complaint.
way
It was
rather
settled that
than
way.
renting him the apartment.
Yeah, well, because he'd already missed out on the apartment. That is
Oh.
the unfortunate thing about it. And just with discrimination, what I found over the years, and by far the most common housing discrimination, and it continues to be against people because they have children and because of their race, primarily if they are African American. On the plus side, if people report the problem immediately when the housing is still available, before the place gets rented to someone else,
Right.
and we intervene on their behalf, or if they go to the city human relations office, if they intervene on their behalf immediately, then they often will get the housing. What's unfortunate, what happens in most cases is once the place is rented to someone else, the victim, even if they can prove they're right, even if they win their case, they're not going to get that housing. And more often what they might get is monetary compensation. And sometimes they don't even get that. And a lot of people who complain aren't even looking for the monetary compensation. They want someone with authority to tell the landlord, you're wrong, don't ever do this to anybody else. And that's what I have found with most people who come to us about discrimination. That's really what they want. They don't even want that. A lot of times they don't even want the housing because they don't want, if this person hates me, I don't want
Right.
to rent from him.
You don't want to be
But they
there.
want someone to tell them, stop it. And I think over time it has changed. And the number of people complaining about discrimination has, when I compare it to 30 years ago, when landlords would call the tenant union and argue with us about whether or not they had to rent to people who are African American, I think some things have changed. It's just not enough, and there's still more change that's needed.
So there are two things that you're kind of pointing out is that there's still room for a lot of education
Yes.
to be done for the landlords. That's one place. And then the second is, again, to repeat where you all are so that when somebody runs into some of these issues that they know where to go immediately to present the case, and then hopefully you'll be able to assist them in resolving it straight away while things are still available.
But then that's the hope. And anyone who's running into a problem with actually any rental housing, including discrimination, should call 352-6220 if it's about housing in Champaign County.
And that's for the people in the Champaign
And that's for
County
the whole
area.
Champaign County area, yes.
Right, if you're a student.
Yeah, if any
again,
U of I students are watching, 333-0112 is the phone number at the University of Illinois where students are helped with their rental housing problems.
Esther, time has gone by so fast, and
Yes,
I
it
haven't
has.
even been able to make the connection between some of these issues and your role on the Urbana City Council. Hope you will come back again
Sure.
and join us. Thank you for spending time with us this afternoon and with Esther Patt. Remember, planning matters.